Is the SEC the best system to do this?
I think the American public kind of gets it, that the system is not fully working for them. That's right.
Oh, yes. I believe
okay.
that's true.
All right.
The apes exposed something really interesting. They crowdsourced a way of rooting out corruption. They found things in the system that didn't seem right, like the information that they were getting was 2 weeks old, that they weren't being told that these 140% shorts totaled that 140%. They knew there was a short, but they didn't get that information until later, and they didn't get the information to the extent of it. And doesn't that show that disclosure and transparency are not functioning to the protection of investors?
I'm not saying this is without its challenges. There are real challenges. Complexity helps them.
Give me a better system. Give me a better system to do this than the one we have in place. Because the one we have in place is getting its butt kicked.
I believe in this system. I believe in our American democracy. You're not going to get me to say
I'm not
something
saying
other than
give
that.
me a different system than American democracy. Purely based on the financial system we have and the stock market.
You know, the other night when we were on the live stream, someone had mentioned that Jon Stewart had taken to Twitter and made an announcement that he was going to be having SEC Commissioner Gary Gensler back on his podcast for Apple TV. My first instinct was to rush over there during the live stream and just randomly throw the top maybe 2 or 3 issues that I have with the handling of the market right now by the SEC and by Congress overall. But I didn't do that, and instead, I'm gonna try to convey my message to Jon. If I was in his seat, what message would I want to get across to Gary Gensler that's really going to make a difference? And I think him posing the question to retail and looking for suggestions is all well and fine, but he knows what needs to be done, and he knows where this conversation needs to go. So, when we come back from the intro, we're going to talk about that. But before we get way too far ahead of ourselves,
chew the speeder.
This is the way.
I think we owe a great debt of gratitude to science. Science has, in many ways, helped ease the suffering of this pandemic, which was more than likely caused by science. So, and that's kind of, hold on a second. No. Listen.
It's coffee. I wouldn't do that to you. I wouldn't do that to you. So what do you mean by that? Do you mean like perhaps there's a chance that this was created in a lab? There's an investigation.
A chance?
Well, but if there's evidence, I'd love to hear it.
There's a novel respiratory coronavirus overtaking Wuhan, China. What do we do? Oh, you know who we could ask? The Wuhan novel respiratory coronavirus lab. The disease is the same name as the lab. That's just a little too weird, don't you think? And then they ask the scientists, they're like, how did this, so wait a minute, you work at the Wuhan respiratory coronavirus lab. How did this happen? And they're like,
before we get into this topic tonight, this conversation about the SEC, Gary Gensler, and what I would really like Jon Stewart to emphasize when he has him on in a couple nights, I just want to say I don't necessarily see eye to eye with Jon Stewart on a lot of subjects, especially if it comes to political and social issues. But I also at the same time feel that that is one of the biggest downfalls right now of our country, is the widening gap and separation between the left and the right. And I think that anytime we can come together as Americans, find a common ground, a common enemy, that makes us stronger as we the people, and especially if it is in the fight for a freer market. Being a retail investor, it is something that's extremely important to me. So I like to give credit where credit is due, and when Jon Stewart came out last year, when it was very unpopular, especially on the social media platforms, it was being called misinformation or disinformation, straight up racism against China if you were to suggest that the lab leak could be a possibility. We now know that it's more than likely that's how the virus got out, but we'll probably never get to the bottom of that. But I think we can get to the bottom of what is going on exactly right now in the stock market. Why are there so many issues? Why can't the SEC enforce anything, get any of the regulations passed through? Why are the fines so low? And the day after John had Gary Gensler on, his very next guest was former SEC Commissioner Rob Jackson. And I want to just take you back to what Rob Jackson said about fixing this market. Watch.
With GameStop, they were holding, I think, a short position of 140% of the entirety of the company. So within all those parameters, the sheriff in that town has to come up with another way of approaching things, because it's very clear what they have decided is we're going to neuter the SEC to the point where we're comfortable paying whatever tariff they impose on us to give us the patina of a well-regulated industry. It is not well-regulated.
Absolutely. It is not well-regulated. And you're absolutely right that the fines that these companies pay, just the cost of doing business for them. Right. That's absolutely right. And what I would say, John, is if we want to have a conversation about how to fix that problem, that conversation's got to include doing something about the amount of money the finance industry gives to Congress. The amount of money that's spent by these sort of the Chamber of Commerce and the Business Roundtable on these congressional races is so astonishing and completely non-transparent that what we end up with is a system where members of Congress don't want to fund the SEC to do its job.
It's a capture. They've been captured.
It's worse. Listen, John, when I was at the SEC, every day I have like a calendar that tells me what I'm doing that day. Half my calendar is meetings with industry, their lawyers, or their lobbyists.
Invest their money into businesses, and those businesses can use that capital to make investments in infrastructure and hire people and all those things. But the other is investor protection. But it seems very clear that investor protection is, again, a facade to really help lubricate and facilitate capital formation for these companies.
Well, I'll say something else about that. You know what I don't understand? What I don't understand is when people talk about those two goals being in tension with each other. Why is it in tension with capital formation to protect investors? To my mind, if you keep people...
Rob, preach, preach!
To my mind, if you keep people from getting screwed over, that'll help capital formation. If you make people believe that the market actually works and isn't a casino, that'll help capital formation.
Going back to why I never responded to Jon Stewart's tweet about asking Gary Gensler's questions about the SEC and its role for retail, I come back to this article right here and what they were just talking about, which is regulatory capture. This is from April 15th, 2021. It's the politics section of CNBC. And it's entitled, Wall Street Execs and Employees Spent $2.9 billion on Campaigns and Lobbying During the 2020 Election, Study Shows. The study by Americans for Financial Reform describes a historic effort by those within banks and other financial groups to contribute to campaigns and lobbying policies. And there's a quote a little further down here in the article from Lisa Donner, who's one of the execs for this financial reform group. She says, year in and year out, this torrent of money gives Wall Street an outsized role in how we are governed, while driving and protecting policies that help this industry's super wealthy amass even greater fortunes at the expense of the rest of us. And this is a issue that falls on both sides of the political aisle. Further down the article, it says, of the $1.9 billion, 47% went to Republicans and 53% went to Democrats. In fact, this report notes that more than $250 million for those working in the fire sector went towards supporting Biden, the most out of all contenders for president. Those contributions were a mix of donations to his campaign and outside groups forcing him. So we have a major flaw right now with the way that our supposed democracy is being run, because the interests of a few are being catered to as opposed to the interests of the masses. And as long as this trend continues, Gary Gensler is going to have his hands tied behind his back, because he's not going to buck the system on Congress. Congress is supposed to be overseeing the SEC. All right, so how do we bring this all home now and wrap it up and get out of here? And what I would say is, I really think that we are questioning the wrong person right now. If in reality, Congress is one step above Gary Gensler, and right now, Congress not only has the capabilities of shutting out retail from any type of fairness, but they are also allowed to collude and even purchase individual stocks as members of Congress, people who are making policy and can benefit financially from that. Until we take these things out of our government and out of our financial systems, then the really only question I have for Gary Gensler is, Gary, when are you going to get the keys to them handcuffs? Oh, or why is he so afraid of doing an interview with Charles Payne? That is the most mind-boggling thing to me ever. He's like one of the coolest, nicest dudes in the entire mainstream media who covers finance. All right, guys, we're going to leave it there for tonight. This video is going a little bit long, but I wanted to make sure that we get all the points across. Thank you to Jon Stewart for bringing Gary Gensler back on like he said he would. And thanks for putting the tweet out to retail so that we can possibly send some questions along your way. And just like everybody else, Gary Gensler's got a higher-ups to answer to. And for some reason, right now, that does not include retail investors. That's been made pretty clear. And that's okay. We're probably not going to see a huge change or anything from this interview in itself or any questions that you do pose to him. My one critique would be from the last interview. I know if it was me sitting down with Gary Gensler, I would try to keep it a little more serious, maybe not as joking around and light as it was last time. I understand the comedian thing and your background, but there's a lot of money at stake here. People are in tough financial times right now. Inflation's out of control. We got supply chain issues still. We're on the verge of nuclear war, and it's a serious problem that we got, and we want to make sure that we keep this a free capital society, and we can't do that if we have the government's boot on our neck. All right, guys, let's leave it there for tonight. We'll try to get another video out by tomorrow. If not, we will be checking in with Jon Stewart and watching this and see what he asks. And let's leave it at that. As always, guys, thank you for the likes, the views, the comments, my new subscribers, my OGs. I appreciate each and every one of you. We're here to break the wheel. This is Ape Nation. I'm the Massalorian, and I'm out.